Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Star Wars Library. Today we're going to go ahead and continue our coverage of the Young Jedi Knight series, and we're going to talk about Book 3 in the series. This is also by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Moesta, and it has the privilege of being actually my first Expanded Universe novel. This is the one that I picked off the rack back in third grade, so it does have a special place in my heart as it is the first one that I ever read, and it is called The Lost Ones, and I have it collected in this nice Rise of the Shadow Academy um, omnibus here with the first arc of the Young Jedi Knight series. So very happy to have this, of course. This came out in December of 1995, and so it's like I said, it was my first Expanded Universe book, so I do have a soft spot for it. But how is it as a story? Well, let's go ahead and dive in. So, the Solo twins end up going back home to Coruscant to visit their parents, Han and Leia. And they invite and bring along Tanel Ka and Lobaka to go with them. So the our four main students are there. So as they're spending time, the twins are like, "Oh, like we should go see our friend from Coruscant, Zek, and we'll bring our friends from Yavin to come and see him." So Zek is going to be another major player in this series. He is a scavenger, a street kid. Kind of lives here and there, but for the most part, he's staying with his friend Old Peckham, or Old Man Peckham, as Zek calls him. And so during this whole thing, they'll go and they're like looking at things. Zek is showing them around in the underworld of Coruscant, similar to Attack of the Clones, and they end up meeting with this group of street youths or whatever. It's a gang called the Lost Ones. So Zek is kind of like, oh, like I could, because Zek's kind of going through this whole thing of I don't know like where I belong. I don't know my parents. I don't know anything. Like, could the Lost Ones give me what I'm looking for, which is a family, people that care about me. And so, Jason and Jane are a little concerned with him or for him. And so Jaina in particular invites Zek to go back with them to this big formal political banquet. Obviously, the twins being the kids of Han and Leia, they have, this is maybe part of the routine for them. So, a little side note here, Jaina and Zek throughout the series, it's kind of hinted that they have like, and it implied that they, have like this flirtatious relationship. They both have a thing for one another. I really liked this, and even as a kid reading this, I was always rooting for Zek and Jaina to get together. I liked them. I liked the differences that they had, and so it was really interesting to me. And so, obviously, and it's even hinted a little bit, later on in other series. But of course, all the EU fans were like, "No, Jaina needs to be with Jag," and it's like, okay, well, Jag's cool, and I like him. But I was always more of a fan of Zek and Jaina. So this was a little tough for me to go back and revisit knowing what happens. But personally, that's just me. Like, I've always preferred Zek. So there's just a little asterisk there. So anyways, Zek goes to this banquet, and it's very awkward. Like, he's clearly a fish out of water. He doesn't know how to act. He doesn't know how to behave. He doesn't come in the best of attire, if I remember correctly, and people are kind of pointing that out, and it's it's very uncomfortable for him. And so he leaves, and he's just like, man, I can't fit in with the Lost Ones. I obviously can't fit in with my friends. I can't fit in anywhere. So Temeth Kai from the Shadow Academy actually ends up finding him, and Zek, of course, is force sensitive, and he's convinced by her to come and study at the Shadow Academy. And so I think he leaves a note or a hologram, if I remember correctly, of basically saying, like, hey, don't come after me. I don't belong here. I don't belong, with you guys. I don't know where to go. Basically, the Shadow Academy are the only ones that are truly going to care about me and love me for me. And so, all of them, particularly Jaina, are heartbroken at this, and they actually end up cutting their vacation a little short so that they can go back to the academy. And it kind of ends with this hopeful, well, I guess what we need to do is just prepare and get ready to face the Shadow Academy and get Zack. They're not going to give up on him. So that's pretty much the story. So while this book is my first Star Wars book that I ever read, in revisiting it, it doesn't feel as strong of a book, at least in comparison to the other Young Jedi Knight series. It's not bad, but in terms of memorability, I think it's the least memorable of at least the first arc. You might have to ask me again once I finish revisiting the series. But it's interesting. Like, and maybe it's because this was the first one I read, and I've read the rest of the. I went back and read the series or the rest of the series, and then, reading the rest of the expanded universe. Coming back to this one, maybe it's like, oh, okay, it doesn't have the oomph that I thought it once did. It had enough to get me to continue on, but maybe not as much as the others. Because it's interesting, like, without giving too much away for the other books that we're yet to talk about, the first one sets up exposition, the second one sets up our enemy, and then the other ones are very significant, and we'll talk about them when we get to them. But what's interesting is that, like, this one introduces Zack, and Zack is a very, like, important character in this series and in future, New Jedi Order Legacy era series or stories. So you think that this would have a bit more of a memorable thing. I don't know. To me, revisiting it, it didn't. Like I said, it's not bad, and I still like it, but it just doesn't have as much memorability as I like. It wasn't as fun revisiting this one as the prior two. So it's interesting. I don't know. That's just me. But I do think it is essential if you're going to be rereading or reading the Young Jedi Knight series. Of course, it's essential because it does introduce Zack, and it does, it's part of the story. I don't think you should skip it. But if you're not reading the Young Jedi Knights, obviously, you're not gonna read this. But it's definitely essential if you're gonna reread or read the series. So even though for me it wasn't as memorable, don't skip this book. It's still very good, and it does continue on the story, and it does bring in new elements that will matter as we continue on in the Young Jedi Knight series. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time with another episode of the Star Wars Library.